Good evening. My name is Abbey Romanek. I'm a judge in the Circuit Court of Cook County Domestic Relations Division. I'm also vice president of the board of the Illinois Holocaust Museum. On behalf of the museum's leadership, survivors, staff, and volunteers, I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight for our first virtual program of the year, responding to anti-Jewish hate on college campuses. Antisemitism has been called the longest hatred. It has been found throughout the world and has led to some of the most horrifying events in human history, including the Holocaust. Today, antisemitism is on an alarming rise. The growth in the number, ferocity, and intensity of public attacks should concern us all, as should the apathy that often greets it. As a world leader in Holocaust education, an important part of the museum's mission is to teach and learn from lesser known or commonly misunderstood aspects of the Holocaust, and to encourage everyone to apply lessons from those events to the present day. That's why tonight we're here for this important program that is part of the ongoing community initiative, Understanding and Confronting Anti-Jewish Hate. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special thanks to all the sponsors of this powerful series that we listed in the opening slides. Tonight, we will have a conversation on anti-Jewish hate, what its impact is on students, how it's being addressed, and how we can support those students. To address those issues, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, Ethan Bless. Ethan is on the pre-medical track at Northwestern University and will graduate this June with a double major in biology and science in human culture and a minor in Spanish. Prior to starting college, Ethan spent a year in Israel, studying at the Hebrew University and volunteering at a youth village near Haifa. At Northwestern, Ethan remains an active member of the Jewish community. He's a leader in the student conservative minyan, and he has represented the Hillel community on several impactful trips to Israel. Notable among these experiences are his participation in the NU Perspectives, an educational program aimed at enlightening non-Jewish students about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as well as his attendance at the Hartman Institute Winter Seminar. He was one of two students chosen to represent the Northwestern Hillel at the 2023 American Jewish Committee Global Forum, where they accepted the Sharon Green Award for Campus Advocacy. I would also like to introduce you to Matt Nosanchuk. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Operations and Outreach in the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. Over the course of his career, working in the executive branch, the Senate and House, and in the nonprofit and private sectors, Matt has developed expertise working on policy, strategy, advocacy, communications, and stakeholder engagement. In 2020, Matt led Jewish and LGBTQ plus outreach efforts for the DNC and the Biden-Harris campaign. Matt served throughout the Obama-Biden administration in senior roles in the White House, on the National Security Council staff, and at the Department of State, Justice, and Homeland Security. These include serving as senior counselor to Assistant Attorney General Tom Perez in the Civil Rights Division, and as White House liaison to American Jewish community, where he played a key role in outreach policy and communications work relating to the U.S.-Israel relationship, combating anti-Semitism, and Vice President Biden's Holocaust Survivor Initiative. Matt is originally from Michigan and is a graduate of Stanford University and Stanford Law School, where he was a Truman Scholar and a senior note editor on the Stanford Law Review. Emily White is Assistant Vice President of Campus Affairs and Executive Director of JUF's Israel Education Center. Emily oversees the IEC's programs, strategy, and educational resource development, all geared toward increasing student and communal capacity to address anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and anti-Israel activism. Emily earned a BA from DePaul University and a Master of Social Work from the University of Michigan. Emily Briskman is Associate Vice President, JUF Campus Affairs, and Executive Director of the Hillels of Illinois. Emily is an expert in informal Jewish and Israel education with 19 years of experience at JUF and Hillel. Emily also serves as a consultant and expert panelist, speaking to thousands of people annually about how to combat the rising tide of anti-Semitism and how young people understand their connections to Jewish identity and Israel. She's a graduate of the University of Florida with a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. Whew, quite a panel. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to begin this evening with an understanding of what exactly is happening on campus and how students are feeling about it. So Ethan, would you tell everyone what the experience has been like for you at Northwestern before October 7th, how that's changed, and what does it feel like for you today to walk around campus as a Jew?
Thank you. And first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on the panel and for everyone watching and attending. This is a really important topic to talk about, and I'm grateful for your time and attention. On the one hand, it's tricky to talk about the experience of anti-Semitism for me because on the one hand, being a student on campus, it's mostly, I don't want to over dramatize the experience. It's mostly a normal experience. I get to walk around, I wear my kippah to class. I'm okay as a student. But on the other hand, even before 10/7 this year, there were days and there were moments at Northwestern where it's not so easy to be Jewish and to hold beliefs of love and support for the state of Israel. And, for me, from my own experience and from friends from school and from other schools. And so it's hard to hold both of those things together as I walk around. But for me, ultimately, my Judaism is hard to not de-link it's hard to not intertwine with Zionism or connection to Israel. And so I guess a moment from my experience at Northwestern that was tricky before 10/7 was actually when I was a first-year student. It was Zoom University, and there was a BDS resolution on campus with, statements of calling Israel an apartheid state and statements of, Israel perpetrating genocide. And, I decided to speak on that panel or on that hearing because I wanted to voice my opinion and say, you know what, respectfully, I know this might pass, but I just want to put out that it seems, obvious to me that if we're going to use words the way I think they should be used, Israel is not perpetrating genocide. And I think that these are inaccurate characterizations. Let's have a conversation about legitimate criticism of Israel. Let's talk about that, but wholesale kind of accusations and criticism, wholesale attacks on the existence of Israel are, for me, like a little bit offensive and dangerous. And so almost immediately on that Zoom call, I had hands popping up. People started interrogating me, other students in a really hostile manner. Who is this guy? Is he a robot? Some laughing like this is a crazy thing for me to say, just to say what I said. And so this was like an introduction for me as a Jewish student who supported Israel, who had spent time in Israel, who has friends and family there, to what the campus kind of culture is around the topic. And although the student government isn't a total picture of campus culture, it really set the tone for me to be at Northwestern, where it wasn't so safe to put my beliefs out there and to be myself. I felt very intimidated and a little bit isolated. In the chat, people were putting like, let's find his email and Instagram. Let's go do that. And so I didn't feel so safe to be Zionist on campus. I guess that kind of set the tone. And then post October 7th, things have, I think, gotten even more tense. But at the same time, not so unexpected based on this culture that I'd been existing in for years and years. So really from the get-go, we had, you know, we had students who put out some really hateful displays against Israel immediately after October 7th. We had a rally or a protest in Evanston that featured a Hamas flag, and there really was just an embrace of that, and it again felt a little bit, isolating as a student, that this campus really is not doing anything about that. They're just kind of letting it be. And so that was kind of the backdrop. And I'll say also that that's not the only story, because there is also an incredible community around me at Northwestern that I've surrounded myself with post October 7th. And so when people ask me about how I'm feeling post October 7th on campus, they see the headlines, it's not safe to be at campus, this and that. A lot of my responses are actually pretty positive, all things considered, because of the support of communities like Northwestern Hillel, and yeah, places like that where I felt a very kind and warm embrace of Jewish students. It's just the sad reality that it's really hard to be Jewish and supportive of Israel in the public sphere at Northwestern.
Thanks. You recently wrote an op-ed discussing your experiences on campus. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to do that and what you wanted to share, what you hope to achieve, and what the response was?
Yeah, so we actually had a speaker who came to Northwestern coincidentally right after 10/7, and the talk became all about that. And they said, you know, it's important to get your thoughts on writing, but on this topic, you really shouldn't write less than an op-ed. So that's like the minimum bar. And so I took that to heart, and I said, okay, I'm going to write an op-ed. I had a lot of thoughts I wanted to vent. And so that's why I wrote it, because I just wanted to write my thoughts and have it reminded me of I hadn't put my thoughts down on paper since, freshman year, that experience. And so this was like, okay, I think I'm ready. And I wanted to kind of paint this picture as a Jewish student on campus, where I'm balancing this tension between, I explained it in the op-ed as a tension between feeling like one hand is closed, one hand is wanting to, protect, and the other hand is sort of open. So I use this hand metaphor. And so I compared the first closed hand to the Jewish phrase "V'hishamda," which, talks about all the times that Jewish people have been persecuted over generation and generation. And this hand was so shaken and in disbelief after what had happened on 10/7, and then the rising hatred right after on campus it was shocking. And so this was the one that wanted to like cling closely to Jewish community and just kind of stay there. But then the other hand was kind of open. It was wanting to reach out. And so I kind of compared that to the Jewish phrase "elu ve'elu," which we know as, sort of multiple truths can exist even if they're different. And that's really tough, but they could coexist. So that's the hand that was kind of open-minded. It was ready to reach out. And, I think both hands were important. So that's what I wanted to write about as a Jewish student on campus. Sometimes people are saying like, we need to close both hands. We need to care about protection and safety. I was writing this op-ed mostly at the Hillel building, where I could see a police car outside. And that was a new norm. There wasn't a police car outside Hillel before 10/7. So that was really like the Hishamda, like, right now. But at the same time, like, it's a tricky balance, because others are saying like, open up both hands and understand what the world is saying about what it means to be a Jew right now. And and listen. And it's a tricky balance between both of those hands. And so the goal is really to write and have my voice, and also a voice that I thought could be representative of the beliefs of a lot of my peers, be heard and seen in the public sphere, which it really did. And a lot of my peers did respond to me saying thank you, like, because we hadn't heard a lot of these, complex opinions about Israel. It's mostly like very anti or pro, but like it's very two-dimensional. It's very flattened. But I also wanted to write this because I wanted to reach out to people who didn't think the same way that I did about Israel. And I think that's legitimate. I think that's important. And I think as college students, we need to embrace that better. We need to have more confidence and trust in each other, that we can share our different frames of reference about difficult topics. And that one is more of an uphill battle, I'll say, but it is something that I continue to strive to work towards, and reaching out one-on-one conversations with students who I think come from different opinions and different perspectives on the Israeli-Palestinian issue in this case, but it could be applicable to other issues as well. Yeah, those are really the reasons why I wrote what I wrote.
It's an amazing response you've had. And for those listening, Ethan's op-ed, the link to the op-ed is in the chat. So I'd like to move on for a moment to a little more of the governmental bird's eye view of other things happening with universities across the country. And slightly before I do that, Matt, I just wanted to inform everybody that Matt's work with the Office of Civil Rights his authority comes from the education and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects people from discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. Specifically states, no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Can you bring that down to earth for us, Matt, and let us know what your office, what kind of activities your office is engaged in?
Sure. Thank you, Abby, for that lead-in. You covered some of my presentation, but maybe I'll repeat it because it probably bears repeating. It's a little bit legalese. But first, I want to thank the Illinois Holocaust Memorial Education Center for hosting this event, for having me as a panelist. This is actually not my first time speaking at the museum. I did it pre-pandemic when we used to have in-person events. And it's, I appreciated the help then from Matthew Sackle, who I believe is still involved. Bernard Cherkasov is a close friend of mine. I know he's doing great work leading this tremendous institution. For me, these issues around anti-Semitism and the Holocaust are personal. I'm a second generation survivor. I had the opportunity, as you pointed out in the introduction, Abby, to work with Vice President Biden on his Holocaust Survivor Initiative when I served in the Obama administration as the Jewish liaison. And I just want to say, that at that time, at anti-Semitism, as it was arising and on the radar of the White House, was really about incidents happening abroad for the most part, right? It was, Charlie Hebdo, the shootings in Paris. It was other incidents that were happening in Europe. Certainly incidents happening, in the broader Middle East. And it wasn't focused on domestic issues. Now, there were issues, to be sure. I mean, I definitely remember one terrible shooting at the Jewish Community Center in Kansas City that occurred when I was there in the White House. But those were not the main focus. Fast forward things have changed dramatically. And even before, 10/7, when I joined the Department of Education, the Biden-Harris administration on September 11th, so like 3 weeks before October 7th, I knew that anti-Semitism and work to counter anti-Semitism would be part of my portfolio of the Office for Civil Rights, because anti-Semitism was on the rise. And, the department and the broader Biden administration were already in the process of implementing the historic first ever national strategy to combat to counter anti-Semitism, which had been released in May. So rising anti-Semitism was very much an issue. Of course, everything amplified, exponentially after October 7th. And, we at the Department of Education have been extremely concerned with the rise in anti-Semitism that has taken place, and the rise in anti-Muslim and anti-Arab activity as well. There has been a lot of many incidents on campuses and in higher education and in K through 12 schools. So OCR, you described our authority under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, and national origin. What you didn't hear was religion, because Title VI actually doesn't explicitly cover religion. However, OCR has a long-standing commitment to addressing anti-Semitic discrimination in our nation's schools through the enforcement of Title VI. And they have, because we have interpreted the prohibition on discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, and national origin to cover what we broadly describe as shared ancestry, and that encompasses anti-Semitic discrimination and other forms of discrimination against groups like Jewish community, Muslims, Arabs, and Sikhs, and others. So this from the Bush administration to the Obama administration to the Trump administration, and now in the Biden administration, this has been our consistent position. And we've released a lot of different resources reaffirming it. Starting back in January of 2023, we put out a fact sheet on discrimination based on shared ancestry. In May of 2023, in connection with the release of the National Strategy to Counter Anti-Semitism, which is this amazing whole of government approach that represents the most comprehensive and ambitious U.S. government effort to address anti-Semitism in American history. As part of that, we participated in the Department of Education's anti-Semitism awareness campaign, issued a Dear Colleague letter that reminds schools of their obligations under Title VI. Dear Colleague letter is basically a document that we'll send out to all schools that are recipients of federal funding to say, look, this is your responsibility. If discrimination occurs, anti-Semitic discrimination occurs, and students experience harassment or a hostile environment, and if you, the school or college or university, don't act to address it, then you can be held liable under Title VI for violating the civil rights of students. And ultimately, if the violations are not cured, you can lose your federal funding from the Department of Education. So we issued this Dear Colleague letter, and all of these resources are actually available on our website, where we've collected resources on shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, and we'll put the URL in the chat. So I'm going to stop there. I can talk a little bit more, Abby, if you want, about what we've been doing since October 7th, but I'll let you.
Please. So what have you done what has your office done to respond to the rise in anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th?
Right. So, we have been focused on combating anti-Semitism long before long before October 7th. And the efforts that I described, serve as the basis for our intensified efforts. We have been enforcing Title VI in cases involving anti-Semitism all along, and we are aggressively responding now with all that we have to address this eruption of hate-filled harassment that we're witnessing during this very painful time. And we definitely acknowledge the pain that is being experienced. And I appreciated what Ethan was saying when he related his experience. We recently met with a group of students who shared similar stories about what they were experiencing on campus. So we understand this is a challenging time. So to meet this moment, we issued in November of last year another Dear Colleague letter that again reminds schools of their legal obligations under Title VI. We updated our website and our complaint form to make it much easier and clearer for people who want to file a complaint alleging discrimination against Jewish students. They can do that online. It's very clear. They can indicate that it's anti-Semitic discrimination that is the basis of their complaint. And actually, anyone can file a complaint. You don't have to be the injured student to file a complaint with OCR. Anyone can file a complaint about something they know about, learn about, read about, or aware of. In addition, we recently released a list of higher education and K through 12 institutions that are under investigation for alleged shared ancestry violations of Title VI. It's only the second time that we've published such a list of investigations that are, identifying a specific category of our enforcement, namely what we call the shared ancestry cases. So this website is updated weekly, and as of today, we have opened 62 complaints raising allegations on, we've received 62 complaints raising allegations. Let me back up. We have opened approximately 62 investigations since October 1st that raise allegations of discrimination on the basis of shared ancestry. And a number of those cases involve cases of anti-Semitic discrimination. I would note that, and that's since October 6th, 62. The Trump administration opened 27 shared ancestry investigations in all 4 years. So in 4 months, we've opened more investigations on this topic than during the whole 4 years of the Trump administration. In fiscal year 2023, we received 62 complaints raising allegations. And so far in the Biden administration, we've opened 105 total shared ancestry investigations. And we secured as many resolution agreements, so we've resolved as many cases addressing anti-Semitism as the Trump administration did in the entire 4 years. So I will stop there. And so that gives you an idea of what we've been doing. And I can talk about actually a recent resolution. Maybe I'll do that. I'll talk about a recent resolution of a case that we just announced actually yesterday. And it gives you an idea of how we work. So we are receiving complaints that are filed alleging discrimination against students and a failure on the part of schools, colleges, and universities to address the discrimination. So we're looking at whether the schools have responded appropriately and legally as they're required to do when faced with these kinds of allegations. So yesterday we announced a case that arose in the Red Clay Consolidated School District in Delaware. Our investigation established that in this school, peers targeted the student for harassment because she's Jewish, and including classmates throwing a paper airplane at her with, quote, blood of the Jews, unquote, and multiple swastikas, as well as bloody injuries scrawled on it. I mean, these are serious and awful things that are happening. And this is an example. Approximately 10 minutes later, in the same area of the school, classmates raised their arms in a Heil Hitler salute, apparently towards the student. A week later, the student discovered a swastika drawn on her desk. And during the same school year, swastikas were drawn on a desk that the student used in a classroom on 2 separate occasions. So while the district responded to most harassing incidents that the student experienced, those responses were often haphazard. They were inconsistently enforced. They were inconsistently reflected in documentation that the district was maintaining. They did not consistently include effective or timely steps to mitigate the effects of the harassment on the student or on other students, and they did not appear to respond to the escalating and repeated incidents. So to resolve the concerns that OCR identified regarding the effectiveness of the district response, the district agreed to offer to reimburse the student's parents for past counseling, academic or therapeutic services that they obtained for the student as a result of the anti-Semitic harassment the student experienced. They agreed to widely publicize an anti-harassment statement. They agreed to review their policies and procedures to ensure that they adequately address Title VI's prohibition on discrimination based on race, color, and national origin, including discrimination based on actual or perceived shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, namely anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab discrimination, and other forms like that. They agreed to develop and revise their procedure for documenting a school's investigation of reports of harassment. They agreed to annually train all administrators, faculty, and staff at the school on what Title VI requires. They agreed to annually train school staff who are involved in processing, investigating, or resolving complaints. They agreed to provide age-appropriate informational program for students at the school to address this kind of discrimination. They agreed to conduct an audit of all the complaints they received during the 2023 to 2024 school year. And they agreed to conduct a climate survey with students and provide OCR, us, with a summary of these survey results. And it's important to note that this case was resolved in 7 months from the time that it was filed, which is actually very quick for the work that we do. And as you can imagine, the investigations that we conduct, they are time consuming, they're detail oriented. We are a neutral law enforcement agency that conducts investigations to determine the facts and whether the law has been violated, and to work with the school districts, colleges and universities to bring them into compliance with the law. So I'm going to stop there, and I welcome additional questions. Yeah.
I do have more, but one, just out of more curiosity, what grade was the child in? Can you tell us that?
I am not sure I can tell you that.
Okay.
We have certain aspects, certain information we don't disclose, to protect.
Okay. I'm just curious what age kids start doing that kind of bullying. Nevertheless, can you give us a little more information onto exactly what OCR does when they get a complaint?
Right. So when OCR gets a complaint, we evaluate the complaints to determine whether the person filing it has raised allegations that fall under our jurisdiction. As I said, we're a neutral fact finder. We have, statutory authority, independent statutory authority. The Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights is in charge of the civil rights enforcement. We have 600 personnel in 12 regional offices. These include lawyers, investigators, and others. And so when we get a complaint, we look at the complaint to see whether it alleges a violation under one of the statutes that we enforce, so Title VI, and then Title IX, Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act with respect to disability-based discrimination, and some other statutes. We determine whether it's brought against a school that receives federal funds from the Department of Education, if it meets those criteria, we will open an investigation and look into the case. We look at every case that meets our threshold criteria and determine whether there's a violation and whether there are steps that need to be taken to address that violation. We want everyone with a stake in students' equal access and safety at school to understand that when harassment based on shared ancestry or national origin occurs, the Title VI legal test is whether the school, college, or university that is a recipient of federal funds from the Department of Education responds promptly and effectively to eliminate any hostile environment and prevent its recurrence. And with respect to federal funds, I'll just say it's any entity that receives federal funds from the Department of Education. So that's basically virtually every public school in the country and most institutions of higher education, public and private.
That actually was my next question. So have you had, what happens when you get a complaint regarding a completely private school?
Well,
Or
if,
is
it,
there really no
if
such
a
thing?
private school, if there's a complaint against a private school and the private school does not receive federal funding from the Department of Education, then it's not within our jurisdiction to enforce it.
Okay. So is it fair to say, because that thought of mine came up with Northwestern, it's a private university.
Most every, as I said, I'm sorry, just to reiterate, it's virtually every public school, K through 12, because and then it's virtually most higher education institutions. So colleges and universities, yes, private colleges and universities receive federal funding, and if so, then they're covered under Title VI. And we have, I can't talk about specific complaints, but if you look at news reports from the past several months, you'll see a number of complaints have been filed involving claims of discrimination from private universities.
Right. Okay. I'd like to move on for a moment. Oh, there's just in the chat, there is the website you talked about, Matt, as well as how to file a complaint with OCR and a case processing manual. We're just getting all that stuff out to everybody. I'd like to also talk now with Emily and Emily about how we are supporting students more directly, as Matt is doing it from the heads of the university and the federal funding from the government. What is JUF doing, and what sort of work is being done on the ground to assist students like Ethan?
Thanks, Abby. I share my panelists' thanks for the invitation to be here. This conversation is so important, and to be amongst this group of people is really an honor. So thank you all. First, JUF is a part of this conversation for several reasons. One, unlike many other federations across the country, Hillel actually sits within the federation. So every Hillel employee in the state of Illinois is actually an employee of JUF, which gives us a really broad view of the world in terms of what's happening with students. So we have the direct access to students like Ethan, who we get to work with, our Hillel staff. And then we have things at JUF like our public affairs committee that deals with elected officials. We've got incredible volunteers and lay leadership who have connections to universities and direct access to leadership within university systems. So we've got this really broad view of how to interact and deal with what's happening on campus. The second is actually over 20 years ago, JUF started this entity that is now called the Israel Education Center, that really was designed to deal with the impact of anti-Israel sentiment, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. And over the years, we have seen as anti-Semitism has mutated. When I started nearly 20 years ago, we started to watch the percentage of increase of anti-Semitic incidents on campuses over the years. I think something like 6 to 8 years ago, it might have been a 30% increase, and then it went to a 60% increase. And then post October 7th, we're seeing somewhere between an 800 and 900% increase of reported incidents of campus anti-Semitism across the country. That is quite the explosion. Luckily, we sit in a place where we have the specific view from JUF is an opportunity to track the trends, meaning because we have access directly to the students who share with us their sentiments, their feelings, how they understand anti-Semitism, to elected officials, to faculty and staff and Hillel professionals. That broad view gives us an opportunity to really understand how anti-Semitism impacts the campus and directly impacts students. We often talk about the existential threat of anti-Semitism. Safety and security is absolutely our number one priority. We have a really robust system within JUF of securing our Hillels, making sure that we have direct contacts and connections with campus police departments and other things to ensure that Jewish students are safe and secure and can go to school unhindered. On the opposite side, we also think about the importance of, well, actually, the existential threat piece is cleaving Israel from Judaism, and then the threat of Jewish students actually just disengaging from Jewish life. Most Jewish students go to campus because they want to learn. They want to have a 365-degree experience, right? Like they are there to learn. They are there to be college students and go to parties and go to class and make friends and connections and network. And that's really important. They don't necessarily go to school to become soldiers for Zion, right? I mean, I think, Ethan, you might agree with me, but most of them are there for that full experience of being a college student. And the existential threat of anti-Semitism is actually just students arriving on campus, seeing the strife and the conflict and the discord happening, and them saying, you know what, I actually don't need this. I can go to school and not tell anybody I'm Jewish, and nobody will have to know who I am or part of my identity. I'm actually going to just hide that from everyone, and instead, I'm just going to go through life not connecting to that piece of who I am. And for us, that is the most dangerous piece of what anti-Semitism can do on college campuses in terms of Jewish identity and Jewish community. You know, I've told this story a few times, but we had a visit by a famous author, Yossi Klein Halevi, who many of you know, also connected to the Shalom Hartman Institute. This was actually pre-October 7th. And he had been having a conversation with a number of students on campus. The conversation started inside Hillel, and then they were moving to another location, and they were trying to continue the conversation across the quad. And as Yossi was recounting his conversation with the students, he said to us, you know, the students were really happy to talk to me and share their experiences, their Jewish identity, and what it means to be Jewish on campus when we were inside Hillel. But as we started walking across campus, their voices lowered and lowered and lowered. As somebody would walk by, they would in fact just stop talking. And he sort of dubbed it this, what we call the American Jewish whisper, meaning the closing off of Jewish identity of college students. And then what does that mean for their future, for the future of Jewish community, and the impact of anti-Semitism or sharing their connection with Zionism and Israel as a part of their Jewish identity, which is for us a deeply important part of being able to come to campus and be your full self. And as Jews, we should be able to express every part of ourselves, no matter where we are. We shouldn't be concerned about who's listening to a conversation or not, because we're scared about what the repercussions of that discussion or belief might be. So for us, we've been watching as this mutation of anti-Semitism has occurred. Many years ago, we were, as a Jewish community, deeply concerned, rightfully so, about the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, resolutions within student government that called for divestment from companies that do business in Israel, and the existential threat of that, and what could it do to Israel, what could it do to Jewish identity. And in fact, it was just a wash of Israel criticism and decrying Israel's being a part of the world. But for Jewish students, they sat in that room saying, Israel is a part of who I am. It doesn't mean I wholesale agree with everything Israel does, but it is a part of who I am and a part of my history and my people. And I need to be able to talk about that without someone saying I shouldn't or can't, or that it shouldn't be a part of who I am, or trying to define it for me. That is part of the, so that was sort of the BDS movement. And we have seen as the BDS movement, which had this sort of cover of political activism, turn into just outright, blatant anti-Semitic acts. I'll give you one example before I turn it over to my colleague, Emily White, who runs our Israel Education Center. But post-October 7th, we heard from one student at a campus who had planned, frankly, a program prior to October 7th with a Holocaust survivor. It was supposed to happen sometime in November, and it was going to be a program that was supported by the university in question. And that student was contacted by the administration and told he couldn't hold the program that he wanted to have because it was, quote, too much of a hot button issue right now. Meaning post-October 7th, we couldn't have a conversation with a Holocaust survivor because it might bring up or disturb the campus climate or environment. Those are the kinds of things that we are seeing on campus, things that Matt shared, incidents that are going on. But the strategies that we deal with it are quite broad. I'm going to turn it over to Emily White to share some of the strategies that we use when we deal with specific incidents, and then happy to fill in anything.
Thank you. Emily, yes. Tell us about some strategies. And then Ethan, I'm going to want you to jump in a little bit and tell us about if you've used them, how you've used them, how they've helped. etc. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, everyone. So one of the first things I want to say at the start of any of the strategy is that our first priority in everything we do is the students.
Yeah.
And that can be hard sometimes. Sometimes there are things that are happening that the community says, why aren't we out there? Why aren't we louder? Why aren't we more public? And the answer is usually because we've spoken to students who live on the campus and who have to live with the repercussions of actions and live with the consequences of decisions that are made, and they didn't want it. And as mental health continues to be an increasing challenge, particularly for the cohort that's in college right now, generation who lived through COVID as students who are trying to find their identities through all of this, our priority is their mental well-being and the sanctity of their identities. So for us, we carry that at the front of everything we do. With that said, when there are incidents, due to what Emily described, our reach is really flexible. So with direct student relationships, partners with the Hillel, being the Hillel, with partnerships with the university, faculty, staff, students, and administrators, through really robust academic friendships and exchange. This is a year-round relationship. These are not phone calls that are made in a moment of panic. These are relationships we nurture. We support education. We support travel programs and researchers and all kinds of different ways the community at large benefits from conversations about Israel. But when there is an emergency, we do have those relationships in place. We are able to connect with individuals who can make a difference, who can make change. So that's the one thing, is that we do make calls to advocate for student well-being as needed and at whatever level of the community is necessary. But for students, there are a few things we recommend. The first thing is to document everything. People joke sometimes about paper trail, and I can be paranoid on this front. But what we found is that really the best thing that students can do to advocate for themselves is keep track of the emails they send, keep track of the reports they file, because if something does rise to the level that it winds up in Matt's desk, it is helpful to have that paperwork to demonstrate the students have tried to follow the protocol of the university and have tried to follow the steps offered by the university to seek their own solutions. Sometimes it works and some universities don't follow their protocol that's laid out for them, but we do encourage students to first work through the university system and really try to see what's doable. Now, it's not always possible. And in those cases, we work with the student to figure out how to advocate best for their needs within the university system. So that could be everything from helping write talking points if they need help articulating what they need. That can be helping edit an op-ed, connecting them with sympathetic faculty, connecting them with community members who have their backs. What we don't do is publicly take credit. So it's unusual for us to be in this situation, speaking to all of you tonight, because we really believe the students should be out in front of the work they do. It is their work, it is their lived experience, these are their lives. And as much advice as we ever offer, it's up to them to make the decision to move forward. While we simultaneously call in our relationships, we work together behind the scenes, we'll work with administrators and staff. We try and think of it as sort of like, if there's a student that's causing a problem, we want students to address that. We believe it should be student to student and staff to staff, faculty, admin, right? We try and keep people within their sphere of influence because it can be very stressful for students to have, I know you're all adults on campus, but bear with me, outside adults reaching in and kind of trying to play chess with student lives.
They're also trying to study.
They've got to study. They've got to study. This isn't the everyday. This isn't their whole lives, as Ethan said to you before. Most of the day, he's a student. He's got to do student stuff and study and get ready for whatever the next day is going to bring in the rest of his life, without the shadow of anti-Semitism hanging over his head. The other thing I'll say we do, and this is also important, is we provide a lot of educational resources and tools for the community. So we can stick some links in the chat. We have a tool called the IEC Lexicon, and it's just jof.org/lexicon. And it's about 140 term encyclopedia of words that come up in conversation about Israel. So it's not just about Israel, but it's words that people often use when discussing Israel. And it offers a technical definition as well as a contextual definition to help people understand, well, this word may have a technical meaning. Here's how it gets used in conversations. Here's how it's understood. Generally, it's all researched, it's cited, it's a completely sound research document, and we encourage people to check it out. We provide tools for how to write letters to a school. We do a lot of work in the high school space as well. And unfortunately, the things that Ethan alluded to and that we've described have been happening on campus. We're seeing a lot in high school spaces. And you think college students aren't prepared for these surprises. High school students, unfortunately, are caught tragically unaware of what's coming, and they're minors, right? So what do you do when you've got perhaps a teacher pressuring a student? We had one situation where a teacher was tearfully pressuring students to sign a petition condemning these genocidal people who are trying to kill her people. What do you do? Because that is a person in a position of power lording that influence over students with emotional manipulation. So to help schools understand what to do in those cases, we also do a lot of administrator trainings. So we believe that holistic education on anti-Semitism is critical to understanding how to respond when there are incidents. Yes, students should receive this as part of their routine bias training, but as a first stop, Emily and I often with our colleagues provide in-depth and really sort of tailored trainings for each institution about anti-Semitism. What Jews are is a huge piece of this. It turns out one of the things people most react to in these trainings is finding out what actually makes someone Jewish, finding out that Jewish people don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, finding out that we don't believe in the New Testament, finding out the Jews are from Israel historically. These are things that people don't understand. There's a pervasive view of Judaism that we're all rich and white and privileged. We're all from Europe. We just sort of emerged from the mist one day as this strange antique religion. And we work hard to provide the context that 12 to 20% of the American Jewish population identifies as Jews of color, to understand that we practice different ways, but we're still Jewish, and to understand what it really looks like to be a part of such a multicultural and profoundly textured but deeply unified people. So these are the ways that we approach our work. Yeah,
I'm going to jump in because I want to add, since October 7th, I think many people have seen a rollout of legal strategies to deal with anti-Semitism on campus, and what does it mean, and why weren't we doing it before, and why is the community focused on legal strategies to deal with anti-Semitism now? There was, really a view that Hillel and other organizations across the city wanted to be in partnership with universities. We have no desire to harm or bring difficulty to universities, because we really value what university life is and what it means to American society, to global society, and to the college students who are there at any particular moment. And I think for us that, the legal lever of an Office of Civil Rights complaint or a lawsuit was really a last resort. And as we're seeing issues of anti-Semitism sort of explode post October 7th, we need to use the legal levers in order to ensure that campuses are welcoming, safe environments for Jewish students. And that you've seen through Hillel International actually opened up something aptly called the Call Center, CALL in all caps. And that is a place for Jewish students and others to file complaints. Those complaints are then vetted by a number of very invested, very strong lawyers from lots of different firms across the country, frankly, who are looking at how to support Jewish life on campus to make sure it can remain robust and test and to ensure that Jewish students get the protections they need, and to make sure that the cases that need to rise to the level of an Office of Civil Rights complaint or to a federal lawsuit will happen and will be represented well. The other issue is also, we've been told even by campus administrations that they need the legal cover. They need to be able to say, we are following the law in dealing with issues of anti-Semitism and enforcing their policies, that they are legally bound to do so, which takes them out of the realm of choosing sides or the perception of choosing sides. So they can say, we are applying the law to what we are doing, and we are ensuring and we are being forced to do so because of these cases and the laws that have been tested through the process of legal intervention. So that's a really important piece of what we're doing. It's a major focus of what we've seen lately. You've seen, a case at the School of the Art Institute that came out recently. I know Matt can't talk about it, but there was an open investigation for Northwestern University in the Office of Civil Rights. We just also found out University of Wisconsin-Madison, same thing. So there are a number of things happening. Now, in some cases, JUF and Hillel are party to those complaints, and in some cases not. We were not party to the complaint at Northwestern nor at University of Wisconsin-Madison, but there are so many members of our community who have been activated by the issue of the rise in anti-Semitism, especially post October 7th. And it has been actually really gratifying to see the outpouring of support from community members who are creating their own parent WhatsApp groups, which are really active in talking about what anti-Semitism is happening, where incidents are going on, and making sure that those who need the information are getting the correct information. And groups that are creating, alumni groups who are ensuring that universities are held accountable for what they are doing and for enforcing their policies. One of the issues we have seen as anti-Semitism has increased is really a lack of enforcement of policies. It's not that universities need new ones or that they need to rewrite codes. In some cases, maybe, but in most cases, we just need them to enforce the policy that exists without bias. And that's why we do things like the administrator training. That's why we do things like writing letters and sharing and making sure that we have proper channels to people in positions of authority who can really make a difference for the day-to-day life of Jewish students.
So Matt, with that being said about this call center, are some of those, and maybe you can't answer this, and if you can, I'm just wondering if your office also works with outside counsel. You're muted.
So the Office for Civil Rights is an independent law enforcement agency that we have our own. We act as kind of the neutral fact finders. So, counsel may file a complaint, and we have received complaints, but they're not lawsuits. There are also lawsuits that are filed on these similar issues, and in instances where there are lawsuits and OCR complaints that address the same allegations, for purposes of conserving resources, et cetera, we will dismiss the complaint and let the legal process and the courts work its way. But one of the there's 2 points I want to make, which are first, I like, what both Emily's referred to, is that resorting to, legal complaints is certainly vital and crucial, and that's what OCR does. I have colleagues in the Department of Education who are focused on providing broader they're focused on the broader engagement. We have resources that I asked to be put in the chat that are on a webpage for our Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships that talk about all the work that's being done to address and lift up the need for dialogue, to provide schools through our National Training and Technical Assistance Center with resources to confront and counteract anti-Semitism, while embracing a broader spectrum of religious diversity, promoting dialogue and the like, so that we achieve an environment where all students are treated with respect and dignity. That's what we ultimately want to achieve, and there are different ways to get there. But certainly, OCR has a crucial role to play when there are violations and schools don't take the steps necessary to address them. But in addition to investigating and resolving complaints, in the Office for Civil Rights, we also have a very important role in conducting trainings and providing technical assistance. So we have been doing trainings. We did one in partnership with the ADL and AJC that had, I think, well over 1,000 participants, where we went over our authority under Title VI to investigate and enforce violations based on anti-Semitic discrimination. We talk about the cases, we talk about the law, we talk about our role, and those trainings are available to any schools or other organizations that maintain a strong interest in these issues, and we are more than happy to conduct those trainings for any groups that would be interested in receiving it, because we are committed to ensuring that there is knowledge and understanding of the important role that OCR has to play in enforcing civil rights. It's one piece of a much larger puzzle with respect to addressing this rise in anti-Semitism, but it's a crucial and important one, and we are committed to doing everything that we can, and we are doing that to fulfill that responsibility.
Great. Are students allowed to come to these trainings as well? And I have a question here Okay,
Absolutely.
and non-Jewish students.
Anyone can come to our, right. We are welcome, you know, I mean, these trainings are requested by organizations and schools. So, you know, we're not generally like offering trainings and you can tune in. I mean, we will organize one and provide one upon request.
And is that true for some of the JUF trainings as well?
Yes, they're designed for campus administrators, faculty, staff, and others. They're really bespoke trainings based on, you know, issues of the university, what they're facing, who we're talking to. Maybe it's a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. Maybe it's the chancellor's cabinet. Maybe it's board of trustees. You know, there depends on who it is. But we have lots of both Jews and non-Jews included in the training to help really raise the awareness of what anti-Semitism is and what it means. I know Ethan had wanted to share a few things. Ethan, do you want to jump in?
I was just going to ask him. Thanks.
Oh yeah. So thanks, Emily. About one of the Emilys talked about sphere of influence. I think it was you, Emily Briskman, and about student to student versus, you know, faculty to faculty. I really appreciate that. And I think in terms of what am I doing, I spoke a little bit about writing, and I also want to mention that when I was a sophomore, I was really interested in this question of Jewish students' connection to Israel on campus at Northwestern. And so I sent out a survey, and I got about 100 responses. And the questions were very simple, like, do you consider yourself Zionist? Do you think Israel is an important part of your Jewish identity? And a lot of students, not very surprisingly, a lot of Jewish students did say that Israel was an important part of their Jewish identity. So it really was a validating thing to me to think like, okay, I'm not alone here. There are a lot of students on campus who there is some, you know, shared belief here. And then, you know, I talked a little bit about discussion. One-on-one dialogue is huge. I think it can be really powerful. But another thing is organizing and coming together in larger moments. And I think post 10/7, I said that community has been a big reason why it's been not so bad at Northwestern, and you know, all things considered. And a lot of that has to do with the active impulse of our community to show up to things and to be present. We've seen a huge increase in just like normal weekly Shabbat dinners at Hillel or Chabad. Post 10/7, I organized a vigil with some friends of mine to in memorial, and we had about, I don't know, a couple hundred students show up to that, and it was really powerful to have you know, just a really big group of Jews together. There was some singing, there was some praying, there was some talking, and then also just like continuing that feeling. So I don't know, there's a little bit of noise behind me. I'm in the Hill building right now. There's a Beit Midrash tonight. So there's we have like bi-weekly Beit Midrash meetings now. I think that got going a little bit more because of the impulse. And one of my friends who leads that spoke about how learning and discussion, and he said it in better words than this, but something about how it being a mitzvah and it being a privilege to be able to do that right now. So yeah, continuing to do those things and leaning in. It's not like a passive, oh, community is great. It's more like an active, like we have to work to make community better. One last thing is post 10/7, I started a weekly minyan in the morning for just a way to start the days off in a better way. It had been really tough. Other Emily talked about how we just want to go to class and things are distracting right now, and that's very true. And it can feel very ostracizing on campus. So starting that day off on a really good foot of praying and a chance to, you know, vent and to be with community in small ways too has been really impactful for me. So yeah, those are some ways that, you know, small ways that I can have some influence peer-to-peer level.
Well, those are all great. I just have a question about, I mean, that's great to have community, clearly, but I'm wondering about other allies and how we're reaching out to people who aren't Jewish, and how are we getting them to help?
Yeah. And so I can speak to that a little bit. I have reached out to students from non-Jewish students from probably different opinions about Israel to have conversations, and I've had one-on-one conversations in the past, and it's impacted me, and I'll continue to do that. Like, I can't speak so much to like official, group to group, because I'm not a leader of any group in a capacity right now, like an Israel group or a Jewish student union group with like say a Muslim student group or a Palestinian student group. I'm not in charge of that, but I would welcome that. I would say let's try to do more of that kind of dialogue. Dialogue. It's really tough though. It's very that is really hard piece.
I was thinking
one of the
more
things I
along-
just
Sure.
one thing to clarify to back up to support really what Ethan is saying here. There's a concept that's rampant on campus, and I want to be mindful of time for you, called anti-normalization. And anti-normalization stipulates that any engagement with someone you disagree with is validating them and validating their viewpoints. Anti-normalization really took hold, really starting about 9 years ago on campus, and became this idea that if a student, let's say I'm an anti-Israel activist, let's pretend, and I interact with Ethan, by mere fact of showing him respect as a person, I'm respecting and validating his views as a Zionist. So I can't speak to him, I can't look at him, I can't engage with him, I can't sit next to him in class, because otherwise I'm validating him if I'm someone who takes issue with Israel. So the damage that anti-normalization has done to campus is really incalculable. It's really what is tearing at the fabric of campus community. And one thing we often hear is, when there are things in student government or there are opportunities to speak up, why don't more students speak up? Why aren't they reaching out? Why don't they? I want to say it is incredibly, shockingly difficult to take those actions, to stand up and put your face out there and put your name out there and put your voice out there. The consequences can be doxing, they can be loss of internships, loss of jobs, loss of friends, loss of status in class, damage to your grades. We've seen at Village Hall, when there are city council resolutions and we ask community members to go speak, we see adults who are CEOs, leaders of companies, thought leaders, quaking in their boots to have to speak because you're in front of a crowd that hates you. They don't just hate Israel, they hate you. They hate you as a Jew, they hate you for what you are and the space you take up. And so I want to really give massive respect to Ethan and the students like him and the other student leaders on campus, in positions or not in positions, who take those brave acts every day by merely stepping out of the house wearing a kippah, stepping out of the house with Jewish Greek letters or a Jewish star on their shirt, and really want to commend them for their willingness to continue to walk into the fray every single day to stand up for who they are, because all of us, we get to go home at night. I get to go home, my house is Jewish, my kids may be mad at me, but it's not for being a Jew, and I get that relief. But for students, it's their dorm mate, their fraternity brothers in some cases, it's their professors, it's every step of the day for them. So I really want to raise a metaphorical glass to the students who are stepping up and really stepping into those positions, because it takes a tremendous amount of courage.
Right. There's no question. I guess that, and we have just a couple more minutes, but I guess I wasn't looking, when I was talking about allies, I wasn't talking about literally those on the other side of the fence that believe specifically different than us. I'm thinking more in terms of the people along the edges who maybe don't have an actual, horse in the race, for lack of a better term. I mean, are there other groups, whether they be Catholic or, a Catholic organization or an Episcopal organization or an LGBTQ organization, that kind of a group?
Okay, yeah, I understand. Thanks for the clarification there. And I think to that, I would say there are programs. For instance, I participated in a program to Israel called NU Perspectives, which takes Jewish students and non-Jewish students to Israel. And you get a lot of students, like kind of that description you gave, Abby, about like, don't know a lot about Israel, maybe have some sort of opinion about it, but don't know much about Judaism either. And it was a wonderful experience. Really eye-opening, very open, joyous, generous experience. And And there are certain programs like that, and students can take advantage of that. I would advertise for NU Perspectives trip pretty much any year. And you get to go with our wonderful Hillel executive director, Michael Simon, of course. But I wish there were more things like that on a smaller scale, because obviously a trip to Israel is not a thing that every student can do. Hillel does do some outreach stuff as well. Again, I'm not involved in an official capacity, but for instance, there's an event called Mega Shabbat, which is a lot of colleges do something like this, where they have a once a year, like, massive Shabbat experience that is open. Well, Hillel is always open to anyone, but that is specifically open to all students to come and join and see what Shabbat looks like. And so that's a really good door, window into Jewish life. There are things like that. But at the same time, I think there could be more. And I think there was a lack of alliance, it felt like, for me, post 10/7 from non-Jews. It felt very, very much so that we were consoling each other from the inside.
If I can add to that, I think what Ethan is sharing is exactly right. That question of those who maybe not be diametrically opposed to Israel or specifically anti-Jewish, but those on the outskirts of the issue who are just trying to understand the geopolitics, what it means to what anti-Semitism really is, and how it enacts itself on campus. The concept for many students of public support is, Emily White shares this a lot. It's a risk. It is a risk for people to do that, because the worst thing you can do on campus is be labeled a racist, a supporter of genocide, an anti Black or other minority supporter, right? Like, there are all of these risks to take when it comes to supporting Jews who are so often on campus called Zionists. And the risks that they have to take are serious, and I think the question is, how do we get there? So actually, JUF and Emily's department started a program called the Civic Engagement Fellowship, which has actually nothing to do with Israel, has nothing to do with Judaism, but is actually a way for both Jewish students and non-Jewish students to get together to talk about the environment in which they live on campus. How can they talk about affordability? How can they talk about
food
any
pantry,
issue that's going on campus, right?
Like,
Like anything that actually matters to the daily lives of all students, and work together for a better campus community without Israel or the geopolitical issues coming into play. And for us, that's actually the place that we want to focus, in really positive engagements with the Jewish community, because once we do that, it's very hard to hate someone who you've built something with, who you've worked with together to better your campus community in really positive ways. And we often talk about, we need the allies, we need the friends. The Jewish community in and of itself is minuscule. We're very small. We need our friends to support, but we do that by being in relationship with each other. And I think part of that is intentionally building those relationships and getting to the point where we feel like we can build something together, and not that we're only asking people to come to support the Jewish community when anti-Semitism occurs. And for us, that's really an important issue, to make sure that we are building together for something really positive, not only dealing in the negative.
I think that's a great place for us to end, and I think our time is up. I'm happy that we're ending a little bit more on a positive note. I want to thank Ethan, and wish you the best of luck in your continued studies and endeavors. And thank you for all the hard work you're doing just being a Jewish student on campus. Matt, thank you so much for all the hard work you're doing and trying to keep the schools and universities to account. And Emily, for everything you're doing to help all the students in our Jewish community and all of our allies and building allies. I really, really appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for coming. And I especially want to be sure and thank all of our sponsors of this event and of this continued powerful series. Please check the Holocaust Museum website for additional events like this. We have a number of them coming up to address all these issues that are just rampant these days. So thank you very, very much again. It's just been my pleasure and the pleasure of on behalf of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.